You don't have to do what I did. You don't have to write a bucket list and then drop everything in your life and pursue it and burn every single bridge professionally, personally, etc. That's not it. What I find is that really, actually, all that anyone needs to do to feel an instant kick in a positive direction is to identify one thing, take one action step towards it, and the process begins. It's as simple as that.
Sebastian Terry. You don't need to wait for the mission. You can live your amazing life right now.
Someone who's by themselves, they might be listening to this and they're like, well, how do I start? I hate to oversimplify it, but it's literally start. I'm so excited about this chat.
Happiness, fulfillment. If that's what you're after, Seb Terry. All right, Seb, your definition of success. How do you see it?
I've always thought that it's being able to identify what's important to you and progressing towards that. And then as a very natural byproduct of you following your heart, there is a benefit to other people. And so I think it's that sort of collision of wanting to do something that's important to you and it being good for others at the same time. I've always thought that's success.
Love it. Love it. Would you add in anything around it being capable of being financially supportive of your life? Or do you think that comes as a natural progression of doing those two things?
It's a really good question. I mean, I don't want to dismiss the importance of being sort of financially secure, but I certainly, I'm not on stages talking about, financial literacy and how to live life like that. But I would certainly say that following your heart is absolutely a must. And I think by doing so, I think the finance of it sorts itself out. And I can only say that through my experience, but I have seen it for others as well.
Yeah. So let's go back then. First part of your definition was finding out what you want or finding out what's important to you and that sort of thing. How did that happen for you, and advice for others that are struggling with that right now, or advice for others who are close to it but not sure they've got it?
Sure. Well, as the impeccable intro that Ben put together, you may know that I have a bucket list, and I've been doing that for 16 years, and there's been a ripple effect that's gone on to influence and impact lots of people around the world. So I'm very grateful and thrilled and surprised at the same time. I wasn't obviously doing this my whole life. I was sort of going through that natural, I would say rigmarole, but that blueprint that a lot of us go through. Finish school, certainly in Australia. I would say it's also in the US as well. Finish high school, go to college or university, come out, get a job, a career, and try and set up for retirement. But a couple of things happened for me. I lost a friend when I was 25 years old, a childhood friend called Chris, and that was obviously a moment that kind of stopped me in my tracks and gave me a sense of perspective on my own life, where I realized I was unhappy and I was without purpose. I didn't feel alive. I didn't feel good, ultimately. And that was the moment that I started writing down a bucket list, sort of predicated by the question, what do I think would make me live a better life? Involving experiences that I would never have dreamt of doing beforehand, maybe experiencing people in different ways, etc. And so I dropped everything in my life to pursue that. So that was the perspective shift for me. And I mean, cut me off where you need to, but it seems to me, having, worked in this space now for a long time, that perspective is almost the first thing that's needed for someone to make that change. And usually we hear that when someone goes through an adversity, being diagnosed with an illness, losing someone close to them, going through a professional or a romantic transition, heartbreak, etc. But what I'm also discovering is that there is such a thing as, I guess it's creating that perspective without having to wait for that dark moment.
I was just thinking exactly that. How do we, I don't want to wait until I almost die or someone, has a thing before I change my life. What if I just want to, if I'm not at that happiness, and we'll get to happiness and fulfillment in a moment, but is there a few things I can do that, to get me on that road?
100%. Yeah, I believe there is. I think if you speak to the people who have done that thing, who have got that, perspective. I mean, the answer is almost in the question. It's how do you get perspective without a dark moment or an adversity? And I think it's just knowing that you can press pause at any moment and just simply give yourself permission, being the kind of actionable word, permission to think about yourself, reflect on where you've come from. I do a lot of obviously keynotes and breakout sessions, etc., workshops. So I would get someone to write a eulogy, actually. pretend that today is their last day on the planet, and what would be said truthfully about every aspect of your life, not to be overly critical or not to judge per se, but more so just to get an idea on the things that you're doing well or the things that you're not doing well. And typically the topics that come up in those situations, those conversations or work, revolve around, career, personal development. Did I chase my dreams? Was I a good friend? Was I a good family member? Did I contribute to the world? Did I travel? Was I as creative as I wanted to be, etc.? And in those moments, good or bad, the purpose of it is just to understand what's important to you. That's the key. If you imagine a wheel of life, a bicycle wheel, which I'm going to call the wheel of life, what we're trying to do is identify the spokes that make your wheel strong. And so that's I would say, the first step. You're trying to get perspective on that. The second thing that I think a lot of people lack, until, of course, an adversity hits, is a lack of vision, so clarity on what they actually want to do on a micro or macro level. The third, I believe, is generally, unfortunately, and I was absolutely this as well, I had an absence of community that inspired me or supported me or encouraged me. As you know, Jim Rohn once said, we're the average of the 5 closest people to us. So that's something that I think is lacking for a lot of people, including myself at one point. That's since changed. And then the last thing I think is fear. We let fear control us a lot. And that's obviously a very, we can deep dive into that. Fear of judgment, fear of change, fear of failure, fear of the unknown, etc. But if you can grasp those concepts and work through them, as I'm very fortunate to do with lots of people, I have seen firsthand that you can actually create that perspective without having to wait for a darker moment.
Now, I notice when I get people to actually build a dream chart or a dream journal, anything that is bucket listy style way of doing something, it's a big interrupt or a pattern interrupt in their life that they go, holy shit, none of this is ever going to happen if I keep doing the current thing. What is it that you think happens in someone's mind when they get that none of that's happening if I keep going this way?
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's referred to the aha moment, something like that. I mean, I think people react to that very differently. For some, it's very confronting, and some go running in the other direction because the fear of change brings up so much internally. I mean, on a psychological level, we don't know if the future is unpredictable with change, and some of us don't like that. We might lose our power or our influence or our identity, stuff like that. So we simply choose not to change. And whereas others, I suppose I am an example of this, think, shit, I've been doing this wrong. Now is the opportunity, and you fling yourself at it.
Yeah, you're a definite deep end kind of guy. I think a lot of people like the shallow end a little more than Seb.
Yeah, I do. I like it. But it's not to say, I mean, I barely read, by the way. I don't want to give my secret away. I barely read. But I did read at one point James Clear's Atomic Habits, and I can't quite remember the quote, but it's something to maybe you know it. It's significant change in your life doesn't require radical change. That's definitely wrong, but you know what I mean. So yeah, you don't have to do what I did. You don't have to write a bucket list and then drop everything in your life and pursue it and burn every single bridge professionally, personally, etc. That's not it. What I find is that really, actually, all that anyone needs to do to feel an instant kick in a positive direction is to identify one thing and just do one action, take one action step towards it, and the process begins. It's as simple as that.
When we look at that whole taking one step, first step, I find that the difference between someone with a bucket list and someone without one is 1 hour of your life. It's like going to your calendar, stating clearly, I will for 1 hour sit down and come up with a few things that I want in my bucket list, things I want to do before the end of my life. I mean, I know because you do the workshop of it, you make them do it like in the room, like you're in my room, you will do this right now, right here. If I'm not in your room, convince me to put that hour in my calendar. Why is that so dang important? I want to hear your version of that, Seb.
Well, firstly, I don't think it even takes an hour. There's not a specific time, but genuinely 10 minutes is enough. Again, it's permission. I'll give you an example. I have a friend of mine called Tal Marge. And at the age of 32, went to the doctors, routine checkup, diagnosed with an aggressive stage 4 cancer. Very soon after that, told he had 6 months to live. So Tal now with this perspective that we're talking about, decided that he wouldn't just go home and say goodbye to his friends, as was suggested by the doctor. Instead, he prioritized the one goal in his life that he'd always wanted to do, which was to go on a shopping spree. So Tal had no money. He went to 4 separate banks, got 4 separate credit cards, then took off for the last 6 months of his life as a 32-year-old, just buying clothes. $90,000 worth of debt he got himself into in the next 6 months as a 32-year-old, because it was his last 6 months on earth, apparently. He's now 60, beaten cancer, healthier than ever, in huge debt, and really, really well dressed. And what it goes to show is it doesn't really take an hour. It takes a split second. So for someone, again, who hasn't gone, someone who's by themselves, and they might be listening to this and they're like, well, how do I start? I hate to oversimplify it, but it's literally start. Action creates progress. Action creates confidence. It creates momentum. And there's so much psychologically from a brain chemistry point of view. Dopamine, serotonin are released into the body. These, again, I'm spitting out things which are very, very generic and known, but dopamine is addictive. It's released in the anticipation of doing something that's exciting to you. Serotonin has the capacity to reduce depression, to regulate anxiety. And these chemicals aren't just released when we achieve a goal, but they are released from the moment we write a goal down. And that takes 3.5 seconds. So for anyone listening to this, like, well, how do I get started? Get a piece of paper, get your phone out, go to notes, whatever it is, and just pause everything in your life. Think about yourself selfishly and just think, what could I do that would make me smile? And write it down. Past that, yes, then you can create a bit of an action plan. I would then argue that you actually need to tell somebody your goal, and in that comes action too. So there you go.
Yeah, write it in the chat of this podcast if you're watching on a platform that has a chat. But I make, like, when people come with me, I actually buy them a bucket list journal. I just call it their journal, and get them to make a list of 20 subjects, like restaurants I want to eat at, or places I want to visit, or events I want to go to, or people I want to meet. Like, just come up with even just categories, not specific things, just categories, and get started. My kids, though, Seb, and I'm not sure if you've done this. My kids, my wife has a great craft room at home, so I went down and grabbed a whole bunch of cardboard sheets. They're like a 3 foot by 2 foot sort of thing, and threw them on the table, and some scissors and glue. And I'd been to the store and I just bought a pile of magazines. It didn't matter what the subject was, because I knew in some magazine, one of my kids will have an interest in something. Threw them on the table and said, kids, I want you to tear out 100 photographs or 100 pictures or 100 words or 100 things. And God, they had fun. But if I could just say to anyone, go to the supermarket or the newsagent or wherever and buy 24 magazines, tear stuff out, stick it down. God, it's easy. It's so easy.
Yeah, and you're sort of priming the mind in that sense, right? You're allowing yourself access to opportunities and ideas that you might not have yourself. We all know a couple of things that we want to do. Everyone, I don't know, common things are do Machu Picchu, climb Base Camp Everest, do a marathon, propose, have kids, like that. But you also, when I created my list, I also asked people what was important to them, and I learned things along the way too. So I think it's starting that ongoing conversation, both literally and metaphorically with yourself. To your point, I think a really beautiful activity for a family to do is to, at the dinner table, go around and share goals. Actually just talk to each other. Say, what's really important to you? What's really important to you? Your kids, your wife, your spouse, your whoever has dinner with you. And I think that's a beautiful conversation. You start to learn things about people. You get to see actually what's important to them, what drives them, what their values are. And once those things are shared, what we find every single time is that because innately as people we're wired to connect and help and support, you will say, Brad, I didn't know you wanted to learn how to bake a cake. I can't, but I know someone who could help you out. And that just it just produces organic connection and help. That's the best part. When I'm on a stage now, I'm so excited for some reason about this chat. When I'm on a stage now, I will have everyone share their goals with me before the talk. And I will then share to the room some of the goals that were shared with me. And on every single occasion, someone will stand up in the crowd and say, I can help with that. It's miraculous. Even my story. This wasn't never meant to be known. I didn't have a plan to write a book or have a show or speak. I just wanted to become happier. And as soon as people started seeing somehow through social media, I guess, my story, and then media outlets, traditional outlets would print a story or have me do a morning show, I would get inundated with strangers around the world saying, "Hey, we know that you want to go to Burning Man. Come with our crew." Or we know that you're looking to do whatever. We can give you accommodation here. People are good. People are good. That's another separate point, but an important one. We're surrounded by good people, but I think they're only activated when you're truly vulnerable and open about what's important to you.
Well, the old Gove couplet about until one is committed, there is nothing, like the magic happens the moment you commit to it. And there's a magic, and you said it, you write it down. There is a magic, and now I've seen studies in it as to why it happens, but handwriting it is so much more powerful than just typing that stuff in. Having a journal that you write in. I carried my dream journal for like, probably when my wife and I got married, we both carried it for like probably 3, 4, 5 months, because you'd be in a place and you'd go, "Hey, what about that?" And you go, "Yeah, let's write that in." "Hey, what about that?" And you'd write it in. Um, it's crazy how, opening the magazines gave me ideas and things. I want to flip it over for 1 second. I caught myself as a young man putting photographs of yachts on my thing, and I freaking hate boats. I don't hate them. I'm not a lover of boats, Of course, I had to marry someone who loves boats, so we're on them all the dang time. But, I love helicopters. I love jets. How do we stop falling for the generic goals that we think the world, that we think we should do, and how do we get into our own goals type thing?
Yeah, I mean, by the way, I don't think there should ever be any judgment on what the goals are. I mean, for one person, having a maxi yacht is really important, and that's great if that's true and authentic to them. For someone else, it might not be. I think, yeah, the more important question you ask is, well, how do we like genuinely go inside and try and understand ourselves on a genuine level? I think that, I mean, there's a lot of ways you can position it. If I actually heard, I can't remember his name. I heard an Australian, he's a monk, but he also is a keynote speaker. Oh, I wish I knew his name because I'd love to reference him. But he said this thing once to a crowd, and he said to a lady in the audience, if the world was ending today, what would you do right now? Would you stay at this event and listen to me speak? And she said no. He said, what would you do? And she said, well, I would go home and to my family. He's like, well, what if on the way home there were your favorite stores and brands and they were all giving away stuff for free? Would you stop in? And she said, no, I'd go straight to my family. And he, kept coming up with options and great opportunities seemingly on the way home. And she kept saying, no, 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 I would go home and spend time with my family. And he said, isn't it interesting that when we realize how finite it is, we get exponential clarity on what's important to us. And, I think if you're able to sort of think about that, whether it's through doing a eulogy or sitting down and just trying to give yourself permission on, okay, what is it I truly, truly want? I think in that clarity comes the actual understanding of what's important to you. For those people in that moment who do say, well, you know what, I want to buy a boat, or fantastic. And for other people who think, I just need to say sorry to my dad, fantastic. And it can be both. I mean, the beauty of a list, as you said earlier, there's all these different categories, and again, having done lots of work in this area, typically there are 12. I'm not going to be able to remember them all, but, there is personal development, professional development / career, impact, creativity, faith / spirituality, travel, personal challenge. It goes on, but it means to say that the same person can have start a charity, fly in a jet. Who cares? As long as it's important to you.
Yeah, I think there's too much focus when we talk bucket list on things. There's not enough focus on experiences. People crave experiences and transformations more than they crave things or knowledge or anything. And it's like, when I put together events for people, it's not about what they're going to learn. It's about who they're going to become by coming to that event. It's like my entrepreneurs training. It's like, I create you into an entrepreneur, not a business owner, not someone who runs one company, but someone who is an entrepreneur, buys, sells, builds companies, sort of thing. And I think that what you do is great around that. And I want to talk about two words next, fulfillment and happiness. Can you give me your thoughts on both of those words? What do they mean to you, or what have you seen out there in the world? And then let's get into how those things become more a part of our day-to-day life.
Sure. Well, I mean, look, I admitted earlier I don't read too much, but I'm aware that those words get mixed up a lot. To the best of my sort of understanding, I suppose happiness is something which is perhaps more fleeting. You feel happy in a moment. Whereas I think fulfillment, was that the other word, fulfillment? Yeah, I think fulfillment is probably something which is longer lasting and perhaps takes a little longer to get to. I would argue that both are obviously crucial, and I think one leads to the other. I think happiness over a consistent amount of time leads to a moment of fulfillment. I think fulfillment arguably is when you are, as a human, I think there are four pillars that allow us to feel fulfilled. I think the first one is being expressed. If we are expressing ourselves in and out of the workplace, that is expression. That is one really crucial element. The other is feeling as though we have full agency over our life. The truth is, we can do anything we want at any moment, right now. What do you want to do? If we feel that we have that, and the decisions that we're making are things which reflect our values and our beliefs, well, but you have agency. The third part is, I think through the first two is finding meaning or purpose, if you will. I think if you have meaning, if you really feel, as people, we deserve to feel that what we do matters by ourselves, with our family, with our friends, in our workspace, with strength. We just want to feel that what we do matters and that we matter. And I think the fourth part is connection. If you feel that you truly are connected to yourself, which is a big conversation, and then from that you feel that you're more able to connect with the people in the world around you, I think that's the last element. So I would say happiness is something you feel when you do something that makes you smile, essentially, to overly simplify it. And then I think fulfillment is when you feel expressed, you have agency, you have meaning, and you connect.
Yeah, I think a lot more of our world needs to be about fulfillment. A lot more of our life needs to be about fulfillment than we have. And I think it's one of the reasons I do this podcast, is to help people find strategies to be better at life, and that's becoming better, doing better, and ultimately then having better. One of the things that I think, Seb, you touched on it, surrounding yourself with people that supported you as a part of your journey. How is it that, we can do great by ourselves, but when, life is a team sport, I guess, business is a team sport. Tell me more about your theories on getting and surrounding yourself with that group and what that leads to.
Well, hey there, and thanks for listening. I've noticed that 78% of you are brand new, which means you haven't hit the subscribe button yet. By subscribing, you help us bring on even better guests, better quality content, and serve you better with even more podcasts. So please hit that subscribe button. It only takes a second. It makes a huge difference. If you support us, we're going to support your success and help you achieve big success together.
Yeah, I mean, I love this subject. I mean, I truly think that any successful team or family or community or organization, I think it's predicated on the individuals being strong within that. And so I would say there's almost like three steps. I think we have to think about me first, not me, Seb Terry, but you. This is already confusing. But you start with me. How do you identify and chase goals that are holistic and allows you to uncover an amount of passion or purpose, let's say, along the way? So how do you just fully feel optimized through the way that we show up to the world? I think the second part to that is then you're shifting a me focus to a you focus, i.e. the people around you. How do you ignite the best in others? I think that's quite literally if I was on a stage, I would get people to ask three questions to one another, which is, you would ask the person next to you, what's important to you? What's stopping you from doing that so far? And where do you need support? It allows people to feel seen and heard and, valued and acknowledged. They're given a voice, which is really important for setting, for I guess, shining a light on someone else and them getting to a place where they can also chase their most important goals. And then I think the biggest shift is, turning a me and you into an us. And I think that comes down to essentially creating a shared vision. again, as a family, as a community, as a business, if you're able to create a shared vision and then you give access to that vision to everyone, so everyone has a place, and then through the doing of that shared vision, I think you're amplifying the message, amplifying the impact. I think we find on every single occasion, yes, we're strong alone, but we are better together. I mean, I'll give a really real example, actually. Maybe it's a bit too personal, but whatever. I've just come out of a relationship, and I thought that this girl was the person. I was absolutely set, and it sort of became a little bit clearer that maybe that wasn't the case. Long story short, through this breakup period, which I'm just on the other side of, I have realized, I spoke to my therapist about this too. I have spoken to good friends and my therapist about this. And because of those people around me, I have come through in a way where I feel not just like back on track, but better than before. And that is, I could not have done that alone. We are strong as individuals. We are resilient. We are creative. We can become motivated, etc. But we just are far better together. That's why I'm able to sit here and feel so bloody alive, to be honest. So again, the lesson or maybe the takeaway for anyone who's listening might be, well, how do I find those people? Well, you find them.
And they find you too, Seb. It's not just you finding them, it's them finding you.
Yeah, you stick a flag in the ground, a stake in the ground. You're like, hey, this is me. This is what's important to me. This is what I'm striving for. This is what I stand for. And then people see that and they gather around you. It's build it and they will come type of mentality.
Seb, I want to touch on something that really wasn't going to focus in on today, but because of your story there, men on average suck at talking to their friends about emotional problems, life, the universe, especially Australian men. I think American men very much fall into the same category. I probably haven't been to a country where men are far better at talking about their emotions than some European countries and some Latin American countries. But what is it then you think for you that led you to a place where, and what are some advice you can give to people so that they are more okay with being men talking about emotions?
Yeah, you're right. I mean, there's certainly that. I don't know. Is that the toxic masculinity? Maybe that's something slightly differently. But
yeah, I think that's taking it to the nth degree is toxic masculinity. I think it doesn't have to be toxic. It can just be, yeah, I'd rather talk about sport than actually tell one of my buddies I'm feeling down.
We hold on to stuff. You're absolutely right. I mean, I live in Venice, California, so everyone here is sharing everything. It's the opposite. But I mean, look, I can only sort of share through my experience that since moving, I've been in the US now for 8 years from Australia, and I have 100% just got better as a human being, and it's because I've learned to share. I said to my therapist about the breakup, I said, I wish I was able to have just done this myself, to process it all, to come to a very clear conclusion myself. And she said, well, to do that is stubborn. To do that is to not be human. We are social creatures. We need each other. We're thirsty to connect. And so when you give someone the opportunity when someone gives you the opportunity, I should say, to just share and they listen, something very, I don't know, magical, I feel, happens. It gives them an opportunity to respond, and 1 + 1 = 3 in that sense, which might not make sense to everyone, especially the entrepreneurs listening. But I do feel that that's the case. Yeah, it's not to say you need to spout to the entire world everything that you do. I mean, you look at social media, and I think Ricky Gervais said at one point that it's like watching an open wound of the individuals who share that. You don't need to share everything, but if you have one person in your corner you can chat to and be really vulnerable with, and they feel the same, you're winning. And my experience tells me that it's vital.
One of my favorite podcast episodes that I ever did was Charles Vogel talking about, just the loneliness of the average human in this day and age of, people having one great friend is really important. But I think it comes back to, just that ability to understand that you have to talk through your challenges. And you mentioned entrepreneurs. There's a reason at ActionCOACH we bring entrepreneurs together every 90 days or every month for our high-level groups, is because when they sit in the same room and discuss their problems and realize they're not alone. And as you said, there's almost always someone that can say, hey, I can help with that. Or, yeah, I did that and this is what happened, sort of thing. And so being open to it, and we notice it around the world, like some markets where we coach, the business owners will tell us on day one, hey, I'm about to go bankrupt. I need to solve this problem. And in other markets, they'll hide from us their economic challenges because they just don't want to share. They got to save face, sort of thing. But bringing that full circle, Seb, the journey to a happy, fulfilled life, it starts with, your word was permission for self. Can you explain that a little more to us? Because I think it's really important that how you frame that is something I think people really need.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know too many other ways to put it, to be honest, but I do think that we live in a world where we're told that chasing our own goals is generally a selfish thing, and we must put everyone else first. And there's certainly a blueprint to how we should be living, suggested from a very young age, through the way we're educated, to the things that we're told to aspire for, etc. In Australia and certainly in the US, people are, at the same time, we have individuality, and we're to a degree, we have agency. And there are other countries, I've spoken a lot around the world. There are other countries where it's not like that, and you very much have to fit within the mold of a family or a culture and what have you. But at the end of the day, it's, again, not to try and oversimplify it, but how does somebody consider what's important to them and do something that's going to be good for them? They choose to. That is it. That is it. The difference between the person at the bottom of the mountain to the person at the top of the mountain is the person at the top of the mountain took that first step. Not to be too cliche, but it's the absolute truth. A lot of people will be on the start line, and they will. I notice this a lot. I will ask people, obviously, often, what's your biggest goal? What's your dream? What would you love to do in your life? And a lot of people, before even saying what they would love, they say, well, I can't. My family, my kids, my financial situation, and all of those things are very real, of course. Like they're practical considerations we have to navigate. But we often just say we can't do it before even knowing what it is we want to do. So it's a big mind shift that's needed, but it's an easy one, and I truly believe it can happen in a split second through permission. We don't have to wait for it. We just don't. Our whole, my experience is that through school and university, I waited for me to get told what to do, whatever it was. And when my friend Chris passed away, when I started a business, which was an inflatable movie screen business that was, it was a circus. But I did that for 2 years. I just did that because I thought that's what you needed to do. It was suggested that you should start a business or whatever. Now, again, I know I'm speaking to an audience of entrepreneurs, and I have a feeling that everyone has chosen that through their own agency, which is great. But I didn't. I just thought I should just kind of do that. Ultimately, we get to a point in our lives where I got to a point in my life where I thought, I'm not going to wait any longer. I'm going to actually just consider what I want to do. The worst thing I can imagine on the planet is being on your deathbed, and in that moment of reflection, you look back at your life and you think, oh, shit. Oh, I should have done that differently. And we get to avoid that. We get to bypass that by right now choosing what we want to do. It's not selfish, by the way. It ends up being selfless, because if we build ourselves up to be this optimized version of ourselves, we very naturally create a ripple effect that impacts others in a good way. Passion, as it turns out, inspires passion. Not only do we unlock unlimited amounts of motivation and clarity and resilience and resourcefulness and all the other wonderful words in ourselves, but we unlock those same qualities in the people around us too. By shining a light, but by doing what we want, we shine a light on others to say, hey, come with me. And that's true. What I'm doing is somewhat celebrated, right? And it irks me a little bit, because why? Anyone can do whatever they want. And, the reason I do what I do, and I'm flying around the US as often as I am, jumping on stages for all these organizations, is the only reason. Well, I mean, look, of course I get paid and that's nice, but the reason that I am passionate about it is because I got an email yesterday, 3 days ago, from a gentleman It was a very intense email, by the way. He said that the talk I gave allowed him to feel something that he hasn't felt in a long way, and no longer will he now take his life. And that's what we're talking about. This guy was on the cusp of taking his own life, but then saw somebody, it could have been anybody, it happened to be me, who just, somebody who was living in a way that made them feel happy, and the byproduct of that ongoingly is feeling fulfilled. And he thought, well, if he can do it, so can I. And that's the truth. That's why I do what I do. I dare say it's exactly why you do what you do, because we create a ripple effect. And we can all start that now. You don't have to wait.
Seb Terry, follow, learn, listen, hit the show notes, do all the things. Hopefully he'll give you, by just doing what he does, permission to go chase your dreams and goals. I'm Brad Sugar's Big Success Podcast. We'll be back next week with more for your success.
You've been listening to the Big Success Podcast with the #1 business coach in the world, Brad Sugars. To learn more about how to achieve business and personal success, as well as how to level up or listen to past episodes, visit www.bradsugars.com.